Hello petals, my name is Anais. I am a womb witch, a Rahani energy teacher, and a plant alchemist. Under Unfurling Alchemy, I guide women in reconnecting with their power, awakening their essence, and step into sovereignty. In these episodes, I am going to approach topics around womb mysteries, energy healing, and cyclic living. Hello petals! This episode might be a dash controversial, so let's just see where this conversation goes. But in this episode, I want to talk to you about becoming unshakable. And I want to start by telling you what I do not mean by this. What I do not mean by this word, because I think unshakable or unshakableness has been used in a specific part of the wellness and spiritual spaces that are drenched in love and light and, high vibes only. And I want to gently but clearly separate myself from that before we go any further. So for me, in my definition, unshakable does not mean never feeling low. It does not mean maintaining a constant state of, in brackets, high vibration. It does not mean waking up every single morning feeling so grateful and perfectly aligned and full of purpose. It does not mean having such a positive mindset that difficulties simply just bounce off you. It does not mean being above the hard things, above grief, above anger, above uncertainty, above the messy, uncomfortable, sometimes painful reality of being a human, living a human life. That version of unshakable is just not real to me. And I think a lot of us have quietly been exhausting ourselves into trying to get there, to get to that place. Because here's what I've noticed. In the wellness and spiritual spaces we move in, there is a particular kind of pressure that can build without anyone intending it. And that is the pressure to always be doing the work, to always be shifting, to always be transmuting, always be moving energy. I feel like underneath that pressure is a real deeply rooted belief. And the belief, this illusion that if you have done enough work, if you have cleared enough, if you have shifted enough, you will eventually arrive at a place where the lows stop coming, where you will never ever again be triggered, where difficult emotions, if anything, are a brief visitor rather than an extended house guest. I chased that place for years in the past with an enormous amount of dedication and sincerity. And I want to tell you something, really important that somehow I wish I knew sooner. That place does not exist. Not because the work is not real, but because that is not what the work is for. So, for a long time, I used my tools to escape the uncomfortable rather than to move through it. For example, waking up in the morning and I would feel a wave of grief. And so I reached for cacao because I knew that cacao would support me in feeling again like love and belonging. When I felt stuck, like stagnant energy, I danced it off. When something made me angry, I knew I could go and scream into a pillow and I would feel better. And don't get me wrong, those tools, they're real and I still use them, all of them. But I was using them back in the day to get out of the feeling as quickly as possible, to shift the energy as quickly as possible, to get back as quickly as possible to being okay, to being back in high vibes, good vibes, positive mindset. And what I actually realized is that is not healing. That is managing. And there is such a profound difference between the two of them. Managing says get me out of the feeling as fast as possible. Healing says, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What is it trying to teach me? And can I be with it long enough to find out? And the version of Unshakable I was chasing, the one where you transcend the lows and live in this sustained state of okayness and positivity, that's not healing, that's spiritual bypassing. And it is so seductive precisely because it sounds so reasonable. Who would not want to feel good all the time? Who would not want to be done, like with the grief and the anger and the stuckness? But the lows, they are not a problem. They are not evidence that you have not healed enough. They are not a sign that something has gone wrong. They are part of being alive, part of being a feeling, sensing, present human being in a world that genuinely sometimes fucking sucks and sometimes is hard. And the exhaustion I felt, the sense of never quite arriving, of always being just one more session, one more retreat, one more ceremony away from finally being in that positive cloud that I thought was the end goal. That exhaustion of that chasing it was telling me something, and it was telling me that I was chasing the wrong thing. Because real healing does not feel like an endless project of fixing yourself. It feels like coming home to yourself. It feels like the slow, gradual accumulation of trust. Trust in your own knowing. Trust in your own capacity to move through whatever life brings, whatever life throws at you. Trust in the compass inside of you that knows the way, even when you cannot see it. That is what unshakable actually means to me. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of something solid underneath the difficulty, something that does not move even when everything around it does, something that does not move and that nobody can take away from you. So, let me offer you a different picture of what unshakable looks like to me. Let's say, I don't know, you receive an email that annoys you, you receive a news that unsettles you, something shifts in your life that you did not choose, a relationship becomes difficult, a plan falls apart, something gets cancelled, someone says something that lands in just such a tender space, and you really feel it, you feel all of it, the grief, the disappointment, the fear, the anger. You do not bypass it. You do not immediately reach for the tool that will shift it. You let yourself actually feel what you feel. And underneath that feeling, underneath the movement of the emotion, there is something that does not move. A groundedness, a quiet knowing that you are okay. Not in a toxic positive way, not in a pretending way, but in a deep, deep embodied way that does not require the circumstances to be different for you to feel fundamentally alright. That does not require anyone to reassure you. That does not require the situation to resolve before you can find your footing again. You move through the hard thing, not around it, not away from it, but through it. And you come out on the other side, still knowing who you are, still connected to what is true for you, still trusting you own compass, your own inner compass, even when the weather was rough. And that is unshakable. And that it doesn't require you for your life to be perfectly sorted. It does not require you to be beyond struggle or complexity or difficult emotion. It does not require other people to behave differently or circumstances to be more favorable. It does not require you to be further along in your healing journey that you currently are. It requires you to have a relationship with your own inner knowing that is strong enough to find its way back to itself, even in the hard moments. That's all. And that's everything. Because here is something that I constantly see in the women that I work with. And yeah, something I have lived for many years myself. And that's when we don't have that inner stability, when we have not yet built that relationship with our own knowing, we look for the answers outside ourselves. We ask everyone around us what they think we should do. We ask validations from our loved ones. We gather opinions and perspectives until we have so many voices in our head that our own has completely disappeared underneath the mountain of them all. And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk to your loved ones, right? Community matters. Community is at the heart of what I'm doing and offering. Perspective absolutely matters. Being in a relationship and allowing others to support you matters enormously. But there is a difference between seeking support and outsourcing authority. Let me repeat that. There is a difference between seeking support and outsourcing your authority. Seeking support is sharing what you're going through and now allowing others to witness you. It is receiving perspective and taking what is useful and leaving the rest. It is being in a relationship without losing yourself in it. Outsourcing your authority is not being able to trust your own knowing until someone else has confirmed it. It is sitting with a clear felt sense of what is right for you and then going to 15 different people to check whether they agree. It is needing that external permission to act on what you already know internally. And I want to tell you something from my own life here to illustrate this, because I think it needs to be said clearly. So from my previous episodes, you may have listened to my journey with my womb and my journey with PCOS and healing a lot of ancestral trauma in my womb space, and that really leading me into the work that I'm offering today. And so for a long time, I was in a significant amount of pain, and I wanted the pain to go away, like physical pain, like not only like around like my bleeds, but also like during ovulation, really pretty much throughout the majority of my cycle. And we're talking like pain where like I wouldn't like sleep at night, I would multiple times be sick, I would sometimes not be able to stand. And the medical professionals I worked with at the time convinced me that the coil was the best option. That it was the only thing that would help, the thing that would absolutely manage it, and that would change everything. The only solution offered to me. And so I agreed, because they were the expert and I was desperate. And because they had the knowledge and the training and in brackets, authority. Because I had been taught, as most of us have been taught, that the people in this position know better than I do about my own body. But from the very first day it was placed, I knew it wasn't right. Not a vague sense of unease, a clear, consistent, daily knowing that this did not belong in my body. I was so hyper aware of it. Like my body was telling me so plainly and persistently that something was wrong and that this wasn't the solution. And I overrode it for years because the external authority said it was the best thing. because I had not yet built enough trust in my own knowing to act on it when it contradicted what I had been told. I was afraid of the work that I would need to do as well. So that is what outsourcing your authority costs you, not just in the decision and in the relationships, but in your own body, in your own physical experience, in the literal space of the womb itself. And when I finally listened, when I finally trusted my body had been telling me for years, I had it removed. And the relief was immediate. And with it came something else, like that deeper understanding of it actually, what it actually means to trust your own body. Of what it costs when you don't. Of how long I had been overriding the most direct and honest intelligence I had in favor of that external voice that, however, well intended, did not live in my body. And I can tell you that from the moment I removed the coil and I was doing really active, really deep womb work and energy healing and ancestral healing and all of that, I have never since experienced any pain at that level, because the whole time I was still on the coil, I was still in pain. I wasn't bleeding anymore, but I was still in pain. Ovulation or around the ovulation period was still extremely painful, which I was repeatedly told was not possible. But here I was with my womb like screaming at me. And after removing the coil, after doing the work, I never had a painful cycle ever again. The most that it has been minor discomfort during ovulation. And so this is what I mean by outsourcing your authority. And this is why reclaiming it matters so profoundly. Like, it matters so much. I can't even put into words like the impact that it will have on your life to reclaim your inner authority and to know that no matter what life throws at you, you fucking got this. So to dive a little bit deeper into this, I want to talk about the centers of intelligence that live within your body. So in my opinion, again, we have 3 primary centers of intelligence. 3 spaces from which we can navigate our lives. Navigate our life, navigate our decisions. And most of us have been taught to use only one of them and potentially like a second one. And even I want to say that feels quite incomplete. So let's get into it. The first is the mind. The mind is extraordinary. The capacity for reason, analyzing, pattern recognition, problem solving, the mind does things that are genuinely remarkable, awe-striking, sometimes even unbelievable. And in many areas of life, it is exactly the right instrument for the job. But the mind can only work with what it already knows. Consciously and unconsciously, every solution it offers you is drawn from that database, from the database of your existence, from the database of your existing experience and programming, which means that when you are trying to navigate a threshold, when you are trying to move into a life that is genuinely different from the one you have been living, the mind will keep offering you variations of what you already know. It will reorganize the existing furniture rather than show you the door to an entirely different room. And here is something that I feel like is also worth saying about the mind, is that when we are living primarily from the mind, we often feel a particular kind of loneliness, even when we are surrounded by people, because the mind processes everything through the filter of what it already knows and believes. And if that filter includes limiting beliefs like I am not enough, or love is not safe, or I have to earn my place, then no amount of external evidence of the contrary will fully get in, will fully penetrate. The mind will find ways to explain it away, to make it fit in the existing story. And so you can be deeply loved and still not feel it. You can be surrounded by people who believe in you and still not trust yourself, because the mind is running a different program underneath all of it, and there is so much to it, both consciously and unconsciously, and in that relationship with your inner critic. And some of you will know that I call my inner critic Nigel. Right. The second center is your heart. And the heart is beautiful. Generally, the heart is where love lives, right? Where compassion lives, where the deep longing to connect and to be connected lives. The heart is essential, and I would never ever ask you to close it or harden it or stop listening to it. Again, if you have listened to some of the other episodes of the podcast, there are whole sessions that are dedicated to my relationship with the heart and this overcoming grief and softening within the heart space. So I would never tell you to close your heart space off. But it's important to have the awareness that the heart has its own particular blindness, its own blind spot, because the heart is emotional. It is connected to love and to longing and to the deep ancient human need to be loved and to be chosen and to belong and to be held. And that connection, as beautiful as it is, means that the heart can lead you towards what feels good rather than what feels true. It can keep you in a relationship that is not right for you because the love is real, even when the alignment is not. It can pull you towards the familiar, even when the familiar is what you need to move away from. It can override you. It can override what you know in favor of what you want. It can stay in something long past the point where everything else in you knows it's time to go, because the heart loves, and love does not always know when to let go. So we have the mind, which can only show you what is already known, what it already knows. And then the heart, which is shaped by love and longing and belonging in ways that do not always align with truth. And both of these are real and important and absolutely deserve their space at the table. But neither of them is where your unshakable knowing lives. That, in my opinion, lives in the womb. The womb is where a different kind of intelligence resides. Not the intelligence of accumulated knowledge, not the intelligence of emotional attunement, but that ancestral intelligence, that deep knowing in your bones, the knowing that has been carried in women's bodies across generations, the intuition that exists beyond what you have learned or experienced or desired, the felt sense in your bone of what is true, what is yours, what is not, what this moment is asking of you. This is the intelligence that does not waver when other people disagree with it. That does not collapse when someone questions it. That does not need external validation because it is not drawn from external sources. It is drawn for something much deeper and much older than any of us. Something that has been passed down through the red thread of the lineage of the women who came before you. Something that knows things your mind has never thought. And that your heart is too close to see clearly. And I want to stay here for a moment because I feel that really matters. Because, we live in a culture that has almost entirely dismissed this kind of knowing. that has labeled it as irrational, unscientific, unreliable, that has told women specifically to trust their thinking mind over their felt sense, to justify their knowing rather than to act on it, to check it against logic and evidence and external authority before they are allowed to trust it. And so most women have spent years, decades, sometimes their entire lives overriding the most reliable intelligence they have. The intelligence that lives in the body, in the womb, in the bones. In that intelligence, the intelligence that my body was using to tell me every single day that the coil was not the right solution. The intelligence I overrode because I had been taught that external authority knew better. And then they wonder why we keep making decisions that don't feel right. Why they keep choosing things that look good on paper but feel hollow in practice. Why women keep asking everyone else what they should do when somewhere inside them already has the answers, already knows. When you are connected to that womb intelligence, when you have done enough work to be able to actually hear it above the noise of the mind and the pulse of the heart, something shifts permanently. You become unshakable. Not because life stops being hard, but because you have a compass that works even in the dark, that works even when you are scared, that works even when everyone around you is pointing in a different direction. You sit within yourself and you know, and that knowing is enough. I want to try to describe what it actually feels like, because I think it can sometimes be one of those things that can feel like really unclear or abstract until you experience it for yourself. And to me, at least, it doesn't feel like the typical loud confidence type of certainty. It does not feel like having all of the answers or knowing exactly what comes next or, like never doubting myself. It does not feel like the absence of fear or confusion or uncertainty. It feels more like a compass. It feels more like a thread, a quiet, consistent thread that runs through everything, that you can find even when you are in the middle of something difficult, even when you are scared, even when you are grieving, even when you are confused about everything else. You can reach for that thread and it is always there. And following it, even when you cannot see where it leads, feels more trustworthy than anything else you have available to you. Because it means that you can receive input from others and generally take it into consideration, but you do not need to know, you don't need it to know what is true for you. You can take that external input and value it and consider it, but you don't need it. You do not need their agreement to move forward. You don't need their blessing. You don't need their approval. You can listen deeply and then come back to yourself and feel into what is actually true and act from there. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it is not what other people would choose or would do, even if nobody can see that vision, even when you can't really justify it to anyone else, even if on paper it makes absolutely no sense. It means that when life brings something hard, you do not immediately start looking for someone else to tell you what to do. You feel what you feel. You give it space. And then you come back to yourself, to the thread, to the knowing, to the inner compass, and you find your next step from there. It means you stop needing the people around you to understand your choices before you can make them. You can share your direction with them, you can value their perspective, you can value their input, but their agreement is no longer the thing that makes the choice feel safe. Your own knowing does that. And that shift from needing that external confirmation to trusting, internally knowing, changes the texture of your relationships entirely, because you are no longer asking the people you love to carry the weight of your decisions. You are no longer putting them in the position of being the authority in your life. And that frees everyone. It frees them from a responsibility they were never supposed to hold. And it frees you to finally be the authority on yourself. It also changes how you experience your own body, because you are connected to your womb intelligence. When you are in an honest, listening relationship with that space inside you, your body stops being something you manage or override or push through. It becomes a source of information, a reliable guide, the place you turn first rather than last. And that relationship with your own body, that quality of honest, attentive listening, is itself a form of unshakable. Because a woman who trusts her body is very hard to convince that she does not know what she knows. That is unshakable. No armor, not detachment, not pretending, but a deep rootedness in yourself that allows you to be more open, to be more present, more fully alive than you have ever been. Because you're not spending your energy protecting yourself or seeking confirmation or managing discomfort of not trusting yourself. You are spending it being fully there, being fully present. I want to tell you about my own journey to this place, because it was not a straight line. I want to make that super clear. This wasn't something that just one day clicked for me and bam, I was unshakable. And I think the honest version of it will, land in a way that the tidy version could not. From a long time, I lived almost entirely in my head. I absolutely worshipped intelligence. In my family, that was the main thing that was validated and sought after and glamorized. Mental processing, the ability to think through a problem, analyze it from every angle and arrive at a logical conclusion, IQ and problem solving. So I place an enormous value on the capacity, and I built a significant part of my identity around it. In a friendship group, I always qualified as the intelligent one. When you were a teen and it was oh, I'm the funny one, I'm the pretty one. I was I'm the smart one, I'm the intelligent one. That was always the goal for me, because I valued it so much. And I dismissed what I now understand to be my deepest intelligence, the soft, quiet, felt sense of knowing that lives in my body, that lives in my bones, that lives in my womb. I called it my soft squishy, and I just didn't trust it, at all. I thought the mind was the instrument of real intelligence, and everything else was noise that needed to be managed. And I think I know where this came from, because growing up, I was really sensitive, and being sensitive was not safe. And again, I have spoken about this in some other episodes, including about being a cactus or a basil. But I think feeling was not valued. Being soft got me hurt, and so I learned very early on to override it, to reach for the thinking mind instead, to stay in my head where things were, logical and manageable, and where I felt a deep sense of control. Hello, Virgo shadow, the need for control. And when my mom died, and I was in my early 20s, and that grief was just so enormous and so all-consuming, so far beyond anything my thinking mind could ever process or contain, that's when something in me made that final decision, the soft knowing, the feeling self, the part of me that was connected to my own depth, that part was not safe to have access to. It was just too much. It would just undo me. So I locked it away. That heart connection, that my soft squishy went behind very strong, very carefully constructed walls, and I put on an armor of the mind, of capability, of competence, of being the person who could handle things. And that armor worked, and for a long time it worked really well. I functioned highly, actually. I achieved things, I built things, I navigated difficulty with what I looked from the outside like remarkable composure. I was the person who had it all together, the person that other people came to when they needed someone steady. But actually I wasn't unshakable. I was defended. I was cut off. And those are very different things. Because defended means you need to keep your walls up constantly, vigilantly, which is exhausting, by the way, in ways that are even hard to describe because the exhaustion becomes so natural that you stop recognizing it as exhaustion. It just becomes like a baseline, the way life just feels. And defended means that when something gets through the walls, when something lands in that tender space, despite all the protection, it completely destabilizing. Because you have no practice with the feeling. You have no relationship with the knowing underneath it. You just, have no thread to reach for, no compass to rely on. And so I began the long work of undoing, of taking down the walls brick by brick. And that work was real and it was necessary, and it changed a great deal of things in my life. Years of it. Slowly softening, slowly reconnecting with my heart, slowly learning to feel again, learning to trust the heart and the body in ways I had closed off for years. But even after all that work, something was still missing. There was still this place I could not fully arrive at, a stability that I could sense was possible, but I had not yet found. I could feel more, I was more open, I was less defended, but still, in certain moments, looking outside myself for confirmation, I was still in that needing someone else to tell me what was right for me, before I could truly trust myself, before I could truly trust my inner knowing. So I was still overriding my body, and I was still overriding what my womb was clearly telling me in favor of those external authorities. And then I dropped into the room. I mean, that was literally, I don't know, sometimes I struggle to describe this. I mean, it was literal, embodied, felt experience of connecting with that space inside me in a way I had never before. Coming into a relationship with the intelligence that lives there, that ancestral knowing, that deep intuition, the compass that has been there all along, underneath all the walls, underneath all the armor, underneath all the years of trusting the mind over everything else. And something in me just settled. Like, not dramatically, not all at once, but something settled that had never been settled before. A quiet, a knowing, a sense of finally come home to a part of myself that was always going to be the foundation. That was always going to be the real stability lift. The part that simply knew, quietly, consistently, without needing anything outside itself to confirm. And from that place, I became unshakable. Not because my life became easier, not because difficult things stopped happening. They didn't. Not because I stopped feeling the hard things or the grief or the uncertainty, but because I finally had a compass that I could trust completely. One that did not require external confirmation, one that did not waver when other people disagreed, one that I could find even in the darkest moment, even when I was scared or grieving or confused. It sit within myself. And it's something that I always go back to. I can sit within myself, connect to my inner compass within my womb, and I know. That is what all those years of work were building towards. Not a perfect inner state, not a fake positive mindset and 100% gratitude all the time. Not the absence of difficulty, but this quiet, unshakable trust in my own knowing, in my own compass, in the intelligence that lives within my womb and in my bones and in the place beneath all the thinking and all the feeling. And I want to talk a little bit about how that feeling of being unshakable is built. And I want to make clear that this is not a list of steps, but an honest description of what I have noticed in myself and in the women I've worked with about what actually moved this forward. Because I think there is a version of this conversation that makes, again, this part of being unshakable sound like a destination you arrive at after enough work, that final destination. And I want to be honest with you, it's not quite like that. It's more like a muscle, something that is built through use, throughout consistent, honest, sometimes uncomfortable practice of choosing to come back to yourself rather than looking outward for the answer. Every time you hear your own knowing and you choose to act on it, even in the smallest way, even when it is uncomfortable, even when the people around you do not understand, you strengthen that muscle. You build the relationship. You make the knowing more solid, more audible, more trustworthy. And every time you override it in favor of an external voice, even a well-intentioned one, even an expert one, you weaken it a little. Not permanently, but consistently. And over time, until that external voice is so much louder than the internal one that you have genuinely lost access to what you actually know. Building it back requires slowing down, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Because the womb intelligent is quiet. It does not shout. It does not compete with the noise of the mind or the pull of the heart. It speaks in a register that is only really audible when you surrender, when you have slowed down enough to actually hear. And in a world that rewards constant doing and constant output and constant availability, slowing down itself can be an act of radical trust. It also requires doing the healing work that clears that interference. Because the knowing is always there, but it can be very hard to hear when there is a lot of unresolved material sitting on top of it. Old wounds, old stories, old patterns, old grief, old trauma, all of that creates noise, and clearing it, not to become perfect, not to be done, but to reduce the noise so that the signal can be heard more clearly is part of the work. And it requires a particular kind of honesty with yourself, that willingness to notice when you are outsourcing rather than trusting, when you are seeking confirmation rather than acting on what you already know, when you are using the voices of others to drown out the voice of yourself. That noticing without judgment, just honest, clear seeing, is where it begins. Because you cannot build trust in your own knowing while you are still systematically overriding it. The building requires the choosing, even when it is uncomfortable, even when you are not sure, even when you cannot justify it to anyone else. This is how it is built, through consistent, honest, sometimes messy practice of coming back to yourself again and again until the coming back becomes the natural movement, until it becomes second nature, until yourself is the place you automatically return to when life gets hard, until you become unshakable. And I want to tell you what becomes possible. Yeah, what I feel becomes possible when you get there, because I think it's important to try to name it concretely, even, if it's looking differently for all of us, not as a fantasy, but as a real description of what I have witnessed in myself and others when this work is done, or when there is this connection to their inner compass. Your decisions change, not because you suddenly have access to more information or better logic, but because you are making them from a different place, from alignment rather than fear, from inner truth rather than external pressure, from what is actually right for you rather than what will make other people comfortable or what will look good from the outside. And decisions made from that place have a different quality, a different texture, a different taste. They feel different in your body, even when they're hard, even when they cost you something. They feel true. And that truth sustains you through the difficulty in a way that no decision ever made from fear could. Your relationships change because you stop needing them to confirm you. You stop needing the people you love to agree with your choices before you can trust them. You stop looking to others to tell you who you are and what you should or should not do or whether you are okay. And that changes everything about how you show up in those relationships. You become more genuinely present because you are not performing or seeking or waiting for validation. You just are yourself, grounded, and that quality of presence is felt by the people around you in a way that deepens connection rather than diminish it. Your relationship with your body changes because you stop overriding it. You stop pushing through signals that are trying to tell you something. You stop deferring to external authorities about things that are happening inside your own physical experience. And you start to listen, and your body, which has been trying to communicate with you all along, starts to feel like an ally rather than something to be managed. Your relationship with difficulty. Your relationship with difficulty changes because you stop being destabilized by the hard things. Not because the hard things stop being hard, by the way. It's not that like suddenly they are easy, but because you have something underneath them that holds. Something that does not shift even when everything around it does. And from that groundedness, you can meet difficulty with a different quality of presence. Not armored, not detached, but rooted. And rooted is a very different experience of hard things than swept away. And your relationship with yourself changes most profoundly of all. Because you stop being at war with your own inner knowing. You stop dismissing the soft, quiet voice in favor of the loud, logical one. You stop outsourcing your authority. You stop waiting for permission, and you start trusting your inner compass. And that trust, bit slowly and consistently over time, becomes the most reliable thing in your life. More reliable than any external circumstance, more reliable than any relationship, more reliable than any achievement or validation or approval. Because it is yours, fully and completely yours. And no one can take this from you. So I want to leave you with a question, and I just want you to feel into it rather than to think about it. And just allow it to land in your body rather than in your mind if you can. Where in your life are you still outsourcing the answers? Where are you asking 15 people for what they think when something somewhere inside you already knows? Where are you letting the voice of the mind or the pull of the heart drown out the quieter, deeper voice that has been trying to guide you all along? Sit with that. Sit with the room, with the part of you that already knows. Because the answer is already there. It has always been there. You just need to get quiet enough to hear it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I see you in the next one, my petals.